I just need 5 minutes because Dr. Sirin just now I've been explain everything that what I want to say. Let me talk about assessments, because all of the speakers before talk about instructional, talk about learning, talk about teaching. But one of the main things that we have to know in teaching learning process, and the main things that we have to do in our teaching process is assessment or evaluations. I took titles of my presentation for today is a lecturer's perception on assessment for learning. This is a new concept in assessments, because before we only talk about assessment of learning and then assessment as learning. These are kinds of assessments that I mentioned before. Assessment of learning, assessment as learning, and then assessment for learning. The new perspective in assessments is focused to the assessment for learning. All the teachers or lecturers, when in the old time or in the past time, they just use assessment of learning and assessment as learning as the tools to evaluate or to grade their students. They just focus to the results, not to the process. And then assessment for learning comes to the new perspective in assessment ideas. They're introducing how to assess the students not only in the results, but also focus to, but also in a process of teaching and learning. This assessment of learning, usually summative. If you are teachers or lecturers, you always grade your students or give a remark to your students at the end of the process, not in the process, okay? And then usually done at the end of a task. Yeah, that's why I said just note that assessment of learning focus to the results, not the process, and becomes public and results in a statement, in statements or symbols about how well students are learning. It is designed to provide evidence of achievements. And the last is be credible and defensible. The next one is assessment as learning. Students are able to learn about themselves as learners. But what about the teachers? These are the questions that we have to answer as a teacher or lecturer. Because assessment as learning focus to the students, yeah, only to know themselves as a learners. But as a teachers or lecturers, what we are going to do. So that's why assessment for learning come as a new concept in a teaching and learning process to assess, to evaluate, to give a remark to the students. Oh, you can read, yeah? It's a very small. Actually, this is my research that I was conducted in several times ago. There are 6 items that relate with assessment for learning. There are 6 constructs to know what the factors of what the lecturer's perception about assessment for learning. First is sharing learning objectives. We call SLO, and then helping students to know and recognize the standard. and peer and self-assessments, providing feedback, promoting confidence, and improving in reviewing and reflecting. So what the results of the construct for assessment for learning? Here is this the demography that relates with the questions about lecturers' perception of assessment for learning. I conduct this research for 6 months in 11 universities around Indonesia. And then I focus to the gender, age, experiences, qualification, and department. So the conclusions of the research that the lecturers who females higher practice than men in knowing about assessment for learning. And that's why I recommend it to all of the universities presidents for the 11 universities in Indonesia that they have to send men to workshop and to increase their skills in assessment for learning. Because this is a new perspective in assessment area. In terms of teaching experiences, it's about the age. The lecturers who have been teaching more than 36 years have a better understanding about IFR assessment for learning than the others. So what about the new lecturers? Still lack in knowing or in understanding about assessment for learning. So, the next, in terms of academic qualifications, the lecturers who have a doctorate degree higher understanding of assessment for learning than master degree. So, this is very hard to mention it. Maybe a new perspective of assessment, that's namely assessment for learning. Many lecturers who focus to the assessment fields have been studied about this one, so not only doctorate again, but also master or undergraduate. And the last one is my recommendations. It's recommended to the university to give a chance to the lecturers in continuing their study for doctorate programs. If you want to know about EFL, assessment for learning in higher education, ask to your rectors, ask to your presidents, yeah, ask to your dean to give you a scholarship, and then going to PhD, take PhD programs, and then study about IFL. I think that's all because the time and then I'm as the dean for Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Universiti Muhammadiyah Makassar. I want to say thank you so much for all of the speakers, Dr. A, Prof. Mira, Prof. John, Prof. Eva, Todd, Prof. Wen, Dr. Siring, and Prof. Endang for your participation in this beautiful conference. We do hope that next year you'll become here again for the new themes, for the new issues. Not talking about industrial revolution again, but we want to talk about society 5.0. Yeah. I know that Prof. Warwick and Todd stay in Japan, and that Japan has been talking about 5.0 societies, and then we want to implement it in Indonesia, especially in Muhammadiyah University of Makassar.